The message came through the deep space relay at exactly 0847 Galactic Standard Time. The Zephyrian communication officer's four eyes widened as the broken transmission crackled through the speakers of the High Command Center on Nexus Prime. The words were spoken in rough, heavily accented Galactic Standard, barely understandable through the static. Warning: the deadliest human warship has landed. Evacuation recommended. High Commander Veltar rose from his crystal throne, his silver skin rippling with concern. In 300 years of conquest, no species had ever sent the Zephyrian Empire a warning. They were the ones who gave warnings. They were the ones who demanded surrender. They were the ones who decided which worlds lived and which worlds died. "Repeat the message," Veltar commanded, his voice echoing through the vast chamber. The communication officer's hands trembled as he replayed the transmission. The same broken words came through again, followed by coordinates for a small moon. In the Titan system, the transmission ended with a soft click, leaving only silence in the command center. "Humans!" spat Subcommander Krixta, her scaled face twisting with disgust. "Those primitive apes think they can threaten us?" Veltar remained silent, studying the tactical display that showed the Titan system. The humans had been a curiosity for decades. Unlike every other species the Zephyrians had encountered, the humans refused to submit. They fought back. They ran when they had to. They hid when they were outgunned. But they never surrendered. On the moon of Titan's Rest, Admiral Kate Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Vengeance, watching the alien mining facility through the main view screen. Her weathered face showed no emotion as she studied the abandoned structures below. At 52 years old, she had seen more battles than most admirals saw in 2 lifetimes. Her gray hair was pulled back in a tight bun, and her blue eyes held the cold hardness of someone who had made too many difficult decisions. "Ma'am, we've secured the landing zone," reported Captain Jake Sullivan through the comm system. His voice was steady, professional. Morrison had handpicked Sullivan for this mission because he was one of the few officers who understood what they were really here to do. "Any signs of recent activity?" Morrison asked, not taking her eyes off the screen. "Negative, Admiral. Looks like they pulled out about 6 months ago, left everything behind in a hurry." Morrison nodded. That matched their intelligence reports. The Zephyrians had been mining this moon for rare crystals until something had spooked them into abandoning the operation. Earth Command wanted to know what that something was. "Continue your sweep, Captain." "And Sullivan?" "Yes, ma'am." "Be careful down there. We don't know what made them run." 2 miles below the Vengeance, Sullivan led his 12-man reconnaissance team through the empty corridors of the mining facility. The walls were covered with the same bio-organic material that all Zephyrian structures used. It looked like living tissue, pulsing slightly with a dim blue light. The air smelled of ozone and something else, something that made Sullivan's skin crawl. "Contact ahead," whispered Sergeant Ryan Brooks, pointing to a large chamber at the end of the corridor. Brooks was a veteran Marine who had survived the massacre at Kepler 7. He had volunteered for this mission because he wanted payback against the aliens who had killed his family. Sullivan raised his hand, signaling the team to stop. He activated his helmet scanner and studied the readings. The chamber showed signs of recent excavation, but something was wrong. The walls were covered with strange markings that didn't match any known Zephyrian writing. "Sir, you need to see this," called out Corporal Amy Chen from deeper in the chamber. Chen was their tech specialist, and her voice carried a note of horror that made Sullivan's blood run cold. Sullivan and Brooks moved carefully into the chamber, their weapons ready. What they found made even these hardened soldiers stop in shock. The walls were lined with fossilized remains, but these weren't random bones. They were arranged in patterns organized by species. Thousands of different alien races, all extinct, all carefully cataloged and displayed like trophies. "Dear God," whispered Brooks. "They're collecting them." Chen's scanner was beeping frantically as she studied the fossils. "Sir, these remains are from dozens of different worlds. Some of these species have been extinct for centuries." Sullivan felt his stomach turn as he realized what they were looking at. The Zephyrians weren't just mining crystals on this moon. They were harvesting the fossilized remains of every species they had ever conquered. The rare crystals they were after only formed in the bones of sentient beings after thousands of years of compression. "Admiral Morrison, this is Sullivan," he said into his comm unit. "You need to hear this. The Zephyrians aren't just conquering other species. They're building their empire on the bones of their victims. Literally. On the bridge of the Vengeance." Morrison's jaw tightened as she listened to Sullivan's report. She had known the Zephyrians were ruthless, but this was beyond anything they had imagined. The aliens weren't just killing other species for territory or resources. They were harvesting them like crops. "Admiral," interrupted Commander Lisa Hayes from the tactical station. Hayes was Morrison's second-in-command, a brilliant officer who had helped design many of the Vengeance's experimental systems. "We're picking up multiple contacts on long-range sensors. Looks like a Zephyrian fleet heading our way." Morrison studied the tactical display. 12 enemy ships, including at least 2 heavy cruisers. They would be here within hours. The smart thing to do would be to run. The Vengeance was powerful, but it was still just one ship against an entire fleet. But running wasn't why they were here. "All hands, this is Admiral Morrison," she announced over the ship's intercom. "Prepare for battle stations. We knew this moment would come. Today we show the galaxy that humanity will not bow down to these monsters." Throughout the ship, the crew began their preparations. In the engine room, Chief Engineer Nathan Price brought the experimental power systems online. The Vengeance wasn't just any warship. It was humanity's most advanced vessel, carrying weapons and technology that had never been tested in real combat. In the Marine barracks, Colonel Oliver Grant briefed his soldiers on their mission. These weren't ordinary Marines. They were volunteers from colonies that had been attacked by the Zephyrians. They had seen what the aliens did to captured humans. They knew that surrender was not an option. "Sir," called out Hayes from her station, "we're receiving a transmission from Earth Command." Morrison walked over to the communication console and activated the secure channel. The image of Admiral Robert Clark appeared on the screen. Clark was the head of Earth's military forces, and his face was grim. "Kate, we've been monitoring the situation. The Zephyrian fleet that's heading your way is just the beginning. Our intelligence suggests they're planning a major offensive against human space." Morrison nodded. She had suspected as much. "What are your orders, sir?" Clark's expression became even more serious. "The gloves are off, Admiral. Show them why. We're still free." The transmission ended, leaving Morrison alone with her thoughts. She looked around the bridge at her crew. These were good people, brave people who had volunteered for a mission they all knew might be their last. They deserved to know the truth. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said quietly, "today we stop running. Today we stop hiding. Today we show the Zephyrian Empire what happens when you threaten humanity." Outside, the stars began to shift as the enemy fleet approached Titan's Rest. The deadliest human warship had indeed landed, and soon the galaxy would learn what that truly meant. The Zephyrian warfleet dropped out of hyperspace like a pack of hungry wolves. 12 massive bioships hung in the darkness above Titan's Rest, their living hulls pulsing with bioluminescent patterns that served as both communication and intimidation. The largest ship, the Eternal Dominion, stretched nearly 2 kilometers from bow to stern. Its surface writhed with organic weapon ports and sensor clusters that looked like eyes scanning the moon below. Fleet Commander Zix Thera stood in the command chamber of her flagship, her tall frame draped in the ceremonial armor of a Zephyrian war leader. Her forearms gestured gracefully as she studied the tactical displays, showing the single human vessel sitting motionless on the moon's surface. The ship looked small and primitive compared to her bioengineered fleet. "Foolish creatures," she hissed to her second-in-command. "They think one ship can stand against the might of the Empire. We will add their bones to our collection." Sub-Commander Velcry nodded, his scaled head bobbing in agreement. "Shall we begin the standard cleansing protocol, Commander?" Zix Thara considered this. The cleansing protocol was designed to eliminate all life on a planet while leaving the infrastructure intact for later harvest. But something about this situation felt different. The humans had sent a warning message. something no other species had ever dared to do. Not yet, she decided. First, we offer them the chance to surrender. I want to understand why they think they can threaten us. On the surface of Titan's Rest, Lieutenant Colonel Ryan Brooks crouched behind a makeshift barrier of mining equipment, watching the sky through his rifle scope. He could see the alien ships as dark shapes against the stars, blocking out the light like storm clouds. His Marines were spread out in defensive positions around the Vengeance, but they all knew their real job wasn't to fight the fleet. Their job was to buy time. "Sir, we've got movement in the facility," reported Sergeant Lisa Hayes through his earpiece. Hayes was leading a team deeper into the mining complex, searching for any technology that might give them an edge in the coming battle. "What kind of movement?" Brooks asked, not taking his eye from the scope. "Unknown contacts, sir. They're moving through the lower levels, but they're not showing up on our motion sensors. It's like they're ghosts." Brooks felt a chill run down his spine. The Zephyrians were known for using biological weapons that could adapt to their environment. If there were still active alien creatures in the facility, his Marines were walking into a trap. "Hayes, pull your team back to the surface. We can't risk losing anyone to whatever's down there." "Copy that, sir. We're moving out now." Inside the Vengeance, Chief Engineer Amy Chen worked frantically in the depths of the ship's experimental systems bay. Banks of computers hummed around her, their screens showing readouts that would have been impossible to understand just 10 years ago. The Vengeance wasn't just a warship. It was a testing ground for humanity's most advanced military technology. "Amy, how are we looking down there?" asked Admiral Morrison through the intercom. Chen wiped sweat from her forehead as she continued her work. "The gravitational pulse generators are online, Admiral. The quantum disruption field is at 60% power and climbing. But Project Reaper..." She hesitated. "Ma'am, I'm not sure we should use it. The simulation showed some unpredictable results." Morrison's voice was calm but firm. "Chief, we're facing 12 enemy ships with weapons we can barely understand. If we don't use every advantage we have, we're all going to die down here." "Understood. Admiral, Project Reaper will be ready in 30 minutes. In the ship's medical bay, Dr. Nathan Price studied the alien tissue samples that Captain Sullivan's team had brought back from the mining facility. What he found made his hands shake as he recorded his observations. The Zephyrian biotechnology wasn't just advanced, it was adaptive. The tissue samples were already trying to integrate with the human equipment they had come into contact with. "Admiral Morrison, this is Dr. Price. I need to speak with you immediately." Morrison arrived in the medical bay within minutes, followed by Commander Hayes. Price showed them the tissue samples under the microscope, pointing out the cellular changes that were occurring in real time. "Admiral, the Zephyrians don't just conquer other species. They absorb them. This tissue is trying to learn from our technology, to adapt and improve itself. Every species they've defeated has made them stronger." Morrison stared at the writhing tissue under the microscope. "How many species have they conquered, Doctor?" Price pulled up his analysis on the main screen. "Based on the genetic markers, I've found at least 40 different sentient races, maybe more. Each conquest has added new capabilities to their biological arsenal." Hayes leaned forward, studying the data. "That's why they've been so successful. They don't just defeat their enemies, they become them." Morrison felt a cold certainty settle in her chest. Humanity wasn't just facing another alien empire. They were facing the combined strength of dozens of extinct civilizations, all wrapped up in one deadly package. "Doctor, what makes humans different? Why haven't they been able to conquer us?" Price was quiet for a moment, thinking. "We adapt differently, Admiral. Other species seem to adapt through biological changes over generations. Humans adapt through learning and creativity. We change our tactics, our technology, our entire approach to problems in real time. It's something the Zephyrians have never encountered before." The ship's intercom crackled to life. "Admiral Morrison to the bridge. We're receiving a transmission from the enemy fleet." Morrison made her way to the bridge, where the main screen showed the image of Fleet Commander Zix Thara. The alien's four eyes fixed on Morrison with predatory interest. "I am Fleet Commander Zix Thara of the Zephyrian Empire," the alien said in perfect galactic standard. "You will surrender your vessel and submit to cleansing protocols. You have 1 hour to comply. Morrison stepped forward, her hands clasped behind her back. I am Admiral Kate Morrison of the United Earthship Vengeance. I counter with this offer. You have 30 minutes to withdraw your forces from this system. This is your only warning. Zixthera's alien features twisted into what might have been amusement. You dare to give us an ultimatum? 1 ship against 12? You humans truly are as foolish as we believed. Commander, Morrison said calmly, you've conquered 40 different species. You've absorbed their strengths and learned their weaknesses. But you've never faced humans in a real fight. You've only seen us running and hiding. Today, you'll learn why we're still free. The transmission ended, leaving silence on the bridge. Commander Hayes looked at Morrison with concern. Admiral, they outgun us 20-1. Even with our experimental weapons, the odds are not in our favor. Morrison smiled grimly. Lisa, when have the odds ever been in humanity's favor? We've been fighting impossible battles since we first looked up at the stars. The difference is we've learned how to win them. Throughout the ship, the crew made their final preparations. In the fighter bay, Major Claire Davis briefed her pilots on their suicide mission. They would be flying experimental craft designed to breach enemy hulls and deploy boarding parties. The mortality rate for such missions was over 90%, but every pilot had volunteered. Remember, Davis told her squadron, we're not trying to win a fair fight. We're trying to send a message that will echo across the galaxy. Today we show them that humanity doesn't just survive. We thrive. In the Marine quarters, Colonel Grant addressed his soldiers. These weren't ordinary Marines. They were survivors of Zephyrian attacks, refugees from destroyed colonies, and volunteers who had lost everything to the alien empire. They had trained for years for this moment. Brothers and sisters, Grant said quietly, we've all lost something to these monsters. Today we take it back. Today we show them that humans don't break. We bend, we adapt, and then we strike back harder than they ever imagined possible. As the 30-minute deadline approached, Admiral Morrison stood on the bridge of the Vengeance, surrounded by her crew. These people had become more than just soldiers under her command. They had become family, united by their shared determination to protect humanity from extinction. All stations report ready, Admiral, announced Hayes from her tactical station. Morrison nodded and activated the ship's general intercom. All hands, this is Admiral Morrison. In a few minutes, we're going to show the Zephyrian Empire something they've never seen before. We're going to show them what happens when you threaten humanity's children. Today we stop being prey. Today we become the hunters. The countdown timer on the main screen reached 0. Above them, the Zephyrian fleet began to move into attack formation, confident in their overwhelming superiority. They had no idea that they were about to face something that would change the balance of power in the galaxy forever. The deadliest human warship was about to show the universe why humanity had earned that reputation. The first wave of Zephyrian bioships descended toward Titan's Rest like a swarm of angry insects. Their living hulls pulsed with toxic energy as they prepared to unleash their standard cleansing attack. Fleet Commander Zixthera watched from her flagship, expecting to see the human vessel destroyed within minutes. No single ship had ever survived a full Zephyrian assault. The Vengeance sat motionless on the moon's surface, looking helpless against the approaching storm. But Admiral Morrison had no intention of fighting like other species. Humans had learned long ago that honor got you killed. Survival required different rules. Chief Chen, bring us up, Morrison ordered calmly. The massive warship began to rise from the lunar surface, but something was wrong with how it moved. Instead of the smooth ascent of a normal spacecraft, the Vengeance lifted like something alive, its hull rippling with energy fields that bent light around its edges. The Zephyrians had never seen technology like this before. Commander Hayes watched her tactical display as the enemy ships opened fire. Streams of bioplasma and living missiles streaked toward the Vengeance, weapons that had destroyed countless worlds. But when they struck the human ship's shields, something unexpected happened. Instead of exploding on contact, the alien weapons seemed to twist and distort, their energy absorbed and redirected. Gravitational pulse shields are holding, reported Chen from engineering. The quantum field generators are converting their energy into our power grid. We're actually getting stronger as they attack us. Zixthara's four eyes widened in disbelief as she watched her most powerful weapons fail against the primitive human vessel. Impossible. Our bioweapons adapt to any defense. How are they stopping us? Her tactical officer, Sub-Commander Velcri, studied his readings with growing alarm. Commander, their shields aren't blocking our attacks, they're eating them. Somehow they're turning our own weapons into fuel for their systems. On the bridge of the Vengeance, Morrison allowed herself a small smile. Humanity's greatest advantage had always been their ability to learn from their enemies. For years, Earth's scientists had studied captured Zephyrian weapons not to copy them, but to find ways to turn their own strength against them. Major Davis, you're cleared for launch, Morrison announced. In the fighter bay, Claire Davis led her squadron of 12 pilots toward their experimental craft. These weren't normal fighters. They looked more like metal eggs with engines designed not for dogfighting, but for something much more dangerous. Each pilot knew they were flying a one-way mission. Remember, people, Davis said over the comm as they launched into space. We're not here to win a fair fight. We're here to make them afraid. The fighters scattered as soon as they left the Vengeance, moving in unpredictable patterns that confused the Zephyrian targeting systems. Instead of attacking the enemy ships directly, they flew toward the moon's surface, disappearing into the maze of canyons and mining tunnels. Where did they go? Demanded Zixthara. Find those fighters. But the human pilots weren't hiding. They were preparing for the most insane military tactic in galactic history. One by one, Davis's fighters emerged from the tunnels at incredible speed, using the moon's gravity to slingshot themselves directly at the Zephyrian bioships. But instead of firing weapons, they activated their breaching charges and crashed through the alien hulls like bullets through paper. Boarding parties away, Davis reported as her fighter tore through the hull of a Zephyrian cruiser. Behind her, 11 other fighters were doing the same thing to different enemy ships. In seconds, 12 human pilots had turned themselves into living missiles, delivering Marine teams directly into the heart of the enemy fleet. Colonel Grant's Marines were already moving before their transport fighters had finished crashing through alien hulls. These weren't normal boarding actions. Human soldiers didn't fight room by room like civilized species. They used explosives, poison gas, and terror tactics that no honorable military would consider. Teams Alpha through Delta, remember your objectives. Grant radioed as he led his own squad through the corridors of an enemy vessel. We're not here to capture these ships. We're here to make them scream. The Zephyrians had never faced enemies inside their own vessels. Their bioships were designed to be living fortresses, nearly impossible to breach from the outside, but humans had found a way inside, and they were using tactics that violated every rule of civilized warfare. Sergeant Ryan Brooks kicked down the door to what looked like the ship's main neural center. The walls were covered with pulsing organic tissue that seemed to react to his presence. He pulled out a device that Dr. Price had given him, something the doctor had called a neural disruptor. Let's see how you like this, Brooks muttered as he activated the device. The effect was immediate and horrifying. The bioship began to convulse as its nervous system overloaded. Throughout the vessel, Zephyrian crew members screamed as their own ship turned against them. The neural pathways that controlled the ship's weapons and movement began firing randomly, causing the massive vessel to spin out of control. Similar scenes were playing out across the enemy fleet as human Marines planted their devices in ship after ship. The Zephyrians had designed their vessels to be extensions of their own bodies, never imagining that someone might use that connection against them. Commander, we're losing ships, reported Velcri, his voice rising in panic. The humans are inside our vessels doing something to our bioneural networks. Zixthara watched in horror as 3 of her cruisers began attacking each other, their weapon systems hijacked by whatever the humans had planted inside them. This wasn't warfare as she understood it. This was something dark and twisted, a kind of fighting that no civilized species would ever consider. But the Vengeance wasn't finished with its surprises. As the enemy fleet struggled with the chaos inside their own ships, Admiral Morrison activated the weapon that would change everything. Dr. Price, initiate Project Reaper, she ordered. In the depths of the Vengeance, Nathan Price's hands shook as he activated the most dangerous weapon humanity had ever created. Project Reaper wasn't designed to destroy enemy ships. It was designed to destroy enemy minds. The weapon sent out a signal that targeted the bio-neural networks that connected all Zephyrian technology. But instead of simply disrupting those networks, it fed them information. Horrible, terrifying information about what humans were capable of when they were pushed too far. Every Zephyrian in the fleet suddenly found their minds filled with images from human history. Wars fought with poison gas and nuclear weapons. Battles where humans had chosen to die rather than surrender. Stories of human soldiers who had continued fighting even after losing limbs or being mortally wounded. But worse than the images of human warfare were the tactical analyses that came with them. Complete breakdowns of every Zephyrian military engagement for the past century, showing exactly how predictable and vulnerable their tactics were. The humans had been watching, learning, and preparing for this moment for decades. "Turn it off," screamed Zixthara, as her mind was flooded with visions of human creativity and warfare. "Make it stop." But there was no stopping it. The signal continued to broadcast, showing the Zephyrians something they had never experienced before: fear. For the first time in their history, they understood what it felt like to be prey. Commander Hayes watched her tactical display as the enemy fleet began to break apart. Ships that had been attacking moments before were now trying to retreat, their crews paralyzed by terror. The great Zephyrian war machine, which had conquered 40 different civilizations, was falling apart because they had finally met an enemy that fought without rules. "Admiral, the enemy flagship is trying to signal us," reported the communications officer. Morrison nodded. "Put them through." Zixthara's image appeared on the screen, but she looked nothing like the confident predator she had been an hour before. Her alien features were twisted with fear, and her voice shook as she spoke. "What are you?" she whispered. "What kind of monsters fights like this?" Morrison stepped forward, her expression cold and merciless. "We're the kind of monsters you created when you started hunting our children. You wanted to know what made humans dangerous? Now you know. We don't just fight to win. We fight to make sure our enemies never want to fight us again." The transmission ended, leaving the Zephyrian fleet commander alone with her terror. Around her, what remained of her mighty fleet was scattered and broken, not by superior firepower, but by the realization that they had finally met a species that was more ruthless than they were. The battle was over, but the real message was just beginning. Soon, every Zephyrian in the galaxy would know that humanity was no longer hiding. The deadliest predators in the universe had finally decided to hunt. The silence that followed the battle was more terrifying than the fighting itself. Scattered across the space around Titan's Rest, the broken remains of the Zephyrian fleet drifted like wounded animals. Some ships spun helplessly, their bio-neural systems still overloaded from the human attack. Others had gone completely dark, their crews too paralyzed by fear to function. Admiral Morrison stood on the bridge of the Vengeance, watching the enemy vessels through the main screen. Her ship hung motionless in space, its experimental weapons powered down but still ready. The message had been sent, but now came the harder part, making sure that message reached every corner of the galaxy. "Admiral, we're receiving multiple distress signals from the enemy fleet," reported Commander Hayes from her tactical station. "It looks like they're calling for reinforcements." Morrison smiled coldly. "Let them call. The more witnesses we have, the better." Fleet Commander Zixthara sat in her command chamber aboard the Eternal Dominion, staring at reports that made no sense. Half her fleet was disabled. The other half was fleeing the system as fast as their biodrives could carry them. In 3 centuries of conquest, she had never seen Zephyrian warriors run from a battle. "Commander, what are your orders?" asked Sub-Commander Valkyrie, his voice shaking with barely controlled panic. Zixthara didn't answer immediately. She was still trying to process what she had witnessed. The humans hadn't just defeated her fleet. They had done something far worse. They had shown her people that the mighty Zephyrian Empire could be beaten by creatures they had considered primitive animals. "Send a message to High Command," she finally said. "Tell them we need immediate reinforcement. Tell them the humans are not what we thought they were." But even as she gave the order, Zixthara knew it was already too late. The humans had broadcast their demonstration across all frequencies. Every Zephyrian ship in a dozen star systems had watched the battle. They had all seen their mighty fleet broken by a single human vessel, using tactics that defied everything they thought they knew about warfare. On the bridge of the Vengeance, Admiral Morrison activated the ship's long-range communications array. It was time to deliver the real message, the one that would change the balance of power in the galaxy forever. "This is Admiral Kate Morrison of the United Earth ship Vengeance," she began, her voice calm and measured. "For 300 years, the Zephyrian Empire has terrorized this galaxy. You have enslaved civilizations, harvested entire species, and built your empire on the bones of the innocent." Her words were being broadcast on every frequency, transmitted to every corner of known space. On thousands of worlds, both Zephyrian and neutral, beings stopped what they were doing to listen to the human admiral's declaration. "Today, that ends," Morrison continued. "You wanted to know what makes humans dangerous? It's not our technology. It's not our numbers. It's our refusal to accept that any enemy is unbeatable. For decades, you thought we were running from you. We weren't running. We were learning." Captain Jake Sullivan and his team had returned to the Vengeance, their mission in the mining facility complete. But they hadn't just gathered intelligence about Zephyrian activities. They had planted something far more valuable. Hidden throughout the abandoned facility were transmitters that would broadcast humanity's message to every ship that came to investigate. Colonel Ryan Brooks stood in the ship's command center, coordinating with his Marines who were still aboard the captured enemy vessels. They weren't destroying the ships or killing the crews. They were doing something much more effective. They were copying every piece of military data they could find. "Admiral, we've downloaded their complete tactical database," Brooks reported. "Fleet movements, defensive strategies, supply routes, everything. It's like they never imagined someone might steal their information." Morrison nodded approvingly. Information was more valuable than destroyed ships. With the Zephyrian military database, Earth Command would know exactly how to hit the Empire where it hurt most. Dr. Nathan Price worked frantically in his laboratory, analyzing the biotechnology samples his teams had collected from the disabled enemy ships. What he found confirmed his worst fears and his greatest hopes at the same time. "Admiral, you need to see this," he called over the intercom. Morrison made her way to the medical bay, where Price had his findings displayed on multiple screens. The data showed genetic markers from dozens of different species, all integrated into Zephyrian biotechnology. "They've been absorbing other species for centuries," Price explained. "But there's something else. The integration process has a weakness. Each time they absorb a new species, they become more complex but also more unstable. They're like a biological house of cards." Morrison studied the data carefully. "Are you saying we can use this against them?" "More than that, Admiral. I'm saying we can turn their greatest strength into their greatest weakness. If we can disrupt the genetic integration at the cellular level, their entire biotechnology network will collapse." Chief Engineer Amy Chen joined them, her face flushed with excitement. "Admiral, we've been analyzing the quantum disruption effects from the battle. The Zephyrian bioships aren't just connected to each other. They're connected to every piece of biotechnology in their empire. Ships, weapons, even their cities." Morrison felt a cold smile cross her face. "You're telling me that if we can affect one part of their network, we can affect all of it?" "Exactly, ma'am. Project Reaper wasn't just a weapon. It was a key that opened every lock in their system. The implications were staggering. Humanity hadn't just won a battle. They had found a way to bring down the entire Zephyrian Empire without firing another shot. Major Claire Davis and her surviving pilots had been recovered from the enemy ships they had crashed into. Out of 12 pilots, only 7 had survived, but their sacrifice had given humanity something invaluable. They had proven that Zephyrian bioships could be boarded and captured by determined humans. "Ma'am, what are your orders?" Davis asked as she stood in Morrison's ready room, still wearing her damaged flight suit. Morrison looked at the young pilot with respect. Davis and her squadron had accomplished the impossible, and they had done it, knowing they probably wouldn't survive. "Major, You and your pilots are going home as heroes. But first, I want you to train every fighter pilot in the fleet. Teach them what you learned today. Teach them that there's no such thing as an impossible mission. Across the galaxy, the news of the Zephyrian defeat spread faster than their ships could carry it. On Nexus Prime, High Commander Veltar received reports that made his scaled hands tremble. The humans hadn't just defeated one fleet. They had sent a message that was destroying Zephyrian morale across the Empire. "Sir, we're receiving reports of uprisings on 17 different worlds," reported his aide. "The slave species are rebelling. They think the humans are coming to free them." Veltar stared at the tactical display showing the locations of the rebellions. They were spreading like a plague, fueled by hope that had been dead for centuries. The humans had done more than win a battle. They had given the galaxy something it had forgotten existed. Hope. Admiral Morrison's final transmission was broadcast from the bridge of the Vengeance as it prepared to leave Titan's Rest. Behind them, the disabled Zephyrian ships drifted in, space, their crews alive but broken. The human admiral had chosen to spare them, but not out of mercy. She wanted them to carry her message back to their empire. "People of the galaxy," Morrison said, looking directly into the camera. "For too long you have lived in fear of the Zephyrian Empire. You have watched as they destroyed world after world, species after species. You have believed that resistance was hopeless." She paused, letting her words sink in across 1,000 different worlds. "Today we proved that wrong. The Zephyrian Empire is not invincible. They can be beaten. They can be stopped. And humanity will not rest until every enslaved world is free." The transmission ended, but the message continued to spread. On worlds throughout the galaxy, beings who had given up hope began to believe again. The deadliest human warship had landed, and it had brought something more powerful than any weapon. It had brought the promise that tyranny could be defeated. As the Vengeance jumped to hyperspace, heading back to Earth with its cargo of captured intelligence and liberated hope, Admiral Morrison made one final log entry. "The Zephyrian Empire spent 3 centuries teaching the galaxy to fear them. Today we taught them to fear us. But more importantly, we taught the galaxy that fear is a choice, and humanity chooses to fight." The war was far from over, but the balance had shifted. The hunters had become the hunted, and the galaxy would never be the same again.